Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and hopefully wherever you are, one of those has to be correct. I hope you're having an awesome day. I'm Craig, I'm your average tech fan, and this is one of my first episodes where I'm going to talk about something I'm really passionate about in technology, and that's camera and videography gear, because I have another channel called Cruising Off Duty, which is a sailing and travel lifestyle vlog channel. And I do a lot of videography, and I do a lot of video editing, so technology in that area especially excites me. So this episode, we're going to talk about the various cameras I use in that channel, from the very basic that I don't use that often, all the way through to my favorite camera, which is presently the Panasonic GH5. So we'll go through them in order of least used to most used, starting with the GoPros. So for GoPros, we have our older style GoPros. This is actually a GoPro 2. I used to have a GoPro 3, but it broke, so now this is my oldest GoPro. It still works. It still shoots in 1080p, and the great thing about a camera like this, it's pretty basic. No screen on the back, unlike my Hero 5 Black, which has a screen on the back. Good thing about a camera like this is you can use it and abuse it, and if it breaks, you really don't care. So you put it in one of these waterproof / shockproof cases and stick it somewhere where it could get abused. You know, if you're an outdoorsy type of person, you can put this thing on your helmet and ride through trees on your mountain bike or whatever you got to do. And if this thing gets knocked off or breaks, you're not too upset about it. One thing that used to upset me when I first bought this is they advertise it and GoPro. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with GoPro. They advertise this as an underwater camera, and the first time I bought it, I went to the Caribbean with Janice and we were scuba diving or snorkeling or something anyway underwater. And when I got home, because there's no screen to look at your footage, and back then I didn't have a laptop to bring with me on a cruise, I got home and found out all the footage was blurry, because if you can look at the lens, it's a rounded lens. And they never explain this in their advertising, that although it's waterproof in this case, yeah, the lens sucked. It kind of made everything distorted and kind of a little blurry, and it was bad. So when they came out with the GoPro 3, which I broke, so I don't have that one anymore, but that was the one where they came out with the flat lens, similar to this, with the GoPro 5. And with a flat lens, when you're underwater, it doesn't distort the image, and it makes everything crystal clear. If you watched my Cruising Off Duty channel when I did the scuba diving, a year ago when I got my certification, and then just recently when we went back scuba diving, I used the GoPro 5, and it is a very good camera for underwater. Again, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I bought the GoPro 5 specifically because it was the first camera that was supposed to be waterproof down to 33 feet or 10 meters without a waterproof case on it. And therefore you had your microphone, so when you're above water you could talk to somebody and people could hear the microphone. And when you went below water, the microphone just recorded the underwater sounds, which didn't really matter. But the point is, it's supposed to be waterproof to 33 feet. Well, I had one of these, and I took it with me on my transatlantic sailing passage series, which you've probably seen. And I swam off the back of the boat, and I just wanted to GoPro under the boat to show what the bottom of the boat looked like in the middle of the ocean. And all of a sudden, the camera just stopped working. And I was like, huh, what the heck? So I showed it to a few other people, and then we noticed there was a drop of water inside the LCD screen here. And I was like, well, that's not good. That's probably why it's not working. So I opened it up, I dried it out, it came back to life. I just assumed, like everybody always assumes, you must have done something wrong. I assumed I must not have closed the battery compartment tight enough or something else. So anyways, on this recent Caribbean cruise, when I went scuba diving, we always had it in the waterproof case for scuba diving. But then on the last excursion, I just went snorkeling, and I figured, why do I need it in the waterproof case? This thing's supposed to be waterproof to 33 feet. So I took it snorkeling, and it leaked again. And this time it didn't come back to life. So I contacted GoPro, and they said I was outside my warranty. My warranty had expired 1 or 2 months, and I was pretty pissed, to tell you the truth. And I sent them back saying, look, I have footage from my YouTube channel when I was out in the Atlantic in November, and it stopped working there because it also leaked. And a little bit of back and forth arguing with them with email. They said, send us the link to your video you made. And I pretty much proved I had filmed it in November. And then they honored it. And so now I actually have 2 of these. I have one here and I have another one in my office. So this one actually I bought right after the first one broke. I bought it on the cruise ship. Cruise ship actually had a decent price, and it was tax-free because you're on a cruise ship out in the middle of the ocean. So it was $299 American for a GoPro 5, and that wasn't bad compared to what we pay here in Canada. So I bought one on the cruise ship, but then I argued to get my first one replaced, and then GoPro eventually agreed, and they sent me another, just the camera, not the whole package. So now I have two cameras, two GoPro 5s, and that's great because you can mount these on bars on your boat, and when the water splashes over them, 33 feet, it should take a splash. So I definitely wouldn't go swimming. I wouldn't test that 33 feet thing because I've already had one leak, so I'm not going to take my chances. So if I'm ever going to swim, I'll put it in a waterproof case. But that's where I use my GoPros. Anytime there's water or there's a likelihood of a lot of water, spray, like if it was out in a big storm, rain and whatnot, I would use a GoPro. I certainly wouldn't use one of my better cameras out in the rain. If you can get your hands on an old GoPro, especially if you want to be rough and tumble with it, or you really, don't want to care about your camera, get yourself an old GoPro, or even better yet, go on Amazon. I'll throw a link in there. When I went scuba diving, a lot of the people aren't buying GoPros anymore. They're buying, oh God, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but the guy that was scuba diving with me, beside me, swore by it. And he was American, so he's talking American prices, but I think he said he spent like $75 for his, and it shot 4K. And anyways, there's knockoffs of GoPro. So we'll give this one, if you can find an old one, sure, get it. I don't even know what stars to give that because they're old, and you get them off of Craigslist or one of those places for probably $50 or something. And then if you want to abuse it, great, go for it. And who cares if it doesn't have a screen or it doesn't have that. If you're gonna throw it on a helmet, you're not gonna look at the screen anyway. Something like this, a GoPro 5 with the screen is amazing because I hate filming and not knowing what is showing up on the, how to frame it. Also with a GoPro, or probably any of the knockoffs that are pretty good, you can decide how wide or how narrow your footage is. So you can have the ultra wide, where it's really big fisheye, or you can have it medium, or you can have it narrow, where it's like a normal camera. And when you don't have a screen, you have no idea whether that thing on the edge of your view is actually in camera or not. So definitely strong belief on my part that you got to get one with a screen. So whether you get a GoPro or whether you get one with knockoff brand cheaper, make sure it has a touch screen on the back. I'd even live if it didn't have a touch screen, if it just had a screen on the back, because the most important thing is to be able to see what settings you're set up in and to see whether your picture is framed properly. So the next camera I use, actually recently I didn't use it at all until I went on my scuba diving Caribbean cruise thing, and that's because I accidentally left my good cameras in the car. I know, how bad is that? Anyways, so I got stuck where my only camera for vlogging, this is my usual vlog camera, I'll talk about it in a second, this got left in the car. So my only camera for vlogging then was my iPhone X, or my iPhone 10. And to be quite honest, this camera is excellent. Got something under the case there. This camera is excellent for filming with this outside camera. It is really good. Obviously shoots 4K. I might go above 30 frames per second. I'll put all the specs for all the different cameras on the side of the screen, but it shoots at least 4K 30 frames per second. It shoots 1080p at much higher. I think it really high. So you can do super slow-mo with this camera. This is image stabilized, or IBIS, in-body image stabilization. So when you're moving and your hand shakes a little bit, it doesn't show up too much, and that's good. It's perfect for being a vlog camera, but the problem is that's this camera, not this camera. So it's a good run and gun camera. You always have your phone in your pocket, and if all of a sudden you find yourself at a really awesome event that you didn't expect and you didn't bring any good cameras, this camera is going to be just fine. When you flip it around and do a selfie though with it, this camera is not image stabilized. So I found this out when I was on the trip. We would hold up the camera, we would talk to it, and when I got back to home to edit it, I noticed all the stuff that was handheld looked jittery because my hand, when you got your arm out full enough for me to get myself and Janice in, it's at the end of your arm and you don't realize it, especially if you're walking, you're bouncing the camera around and it's not image stabilized. So to get around that, I've recently bought an Osmo Mobile 2, which is one of those powered gimbals for your phone, so that when you flip it around and it's a front-facing camera, the gimbal will stabilize it. The camera can't stabilize it, but the gimbal will. So that's my next favorite camera, or next most used camera. It's actually much higher. I love it a lot more than I love my GoPros. They're very much at the bottom. But my iPhone X is a great camera, and like I say, it's one of those cameras you always have on you, so you should get used to using it. The next one that I really use a lot, probably use this one almost as much or more than my other cameras, is my Canon G7X Mark II. And this is one of those cameras that's the perfect vlog camera. It's not too small, or not too big, so you don't feel completely ridiculous pointing this at yourself in public. Oh, and in case you're wondering, this is this little mohawk it's got is a little kind of a dead cat I've made for it. I've Velcroed over the holes that are the microphones on this camera so that wind noise, and that's the thing about a sailing channel, you get a lot of wind noise, so you got to make sure you can buffer the microphone so you don't get that constant sound. That's annoying to me. So anyways, I put that on there, it works perfectly. The good thing about this camera, it's in-body image stabilized, so when you power it up, the lens comes out. It's got a zoomable lens. I'll put the stats for what it zooms to. It shoots only 1080p. That's the only downside with this camera. It doesn't shoot 4K. So whenever you start using this a lot, you tend to just edit all your footage in 1080p, because why edit in 4K when footage from this only goes 1080p? It's got the flip-up screen, which is perfect for vlogging, so you can see what you're filming. And yeah, it's just a great all-around camera. The only thing that was kind of a detractor for me, if I have to put a negative on it, is can't see it anymore because I've had to glue them open. But there's little shutters that open and close on the front of this camera. And unfortunately, when I was in Spain, this kind of fell off my camera bag face down into the sand. Like we're talking, it fell like an inch. So it wasn't the impact that did any damage. It just slid off my bag. A little sand on the front, I dusted it off, thought everything was great. And then after that, every time I opened and closed it, these little shutters, when you close it, power off like this, the shutters are supposed to close. And when you power it up, shutters are supposed to open. Well, one shutter would open and the other one wouldn't, or vice versa. It just became a pain in the butt. You'd always have to physically push the other one open, and then after a while, they both wouldn't open. So eventually, I had no choice. I actually took it to a camera shop to get it fixed. They charged me money. They fixed it and it lasted about 3 days, and then it started doing the same problem it had before. So clearly, they didn't really fix it. So I finally just opened them up with a Q-tip, and I got a little bit of super glue, and I glued the edges so that the doors won't open and close. But that's the only thing. Had this camera had a lens cap like a normal camera, this camera would be perfect in my mind. So if you only had one camera, you're doing a vlog style video channel, this camera will do it all. I mean, it has a zoom, you can zoom in and out. You can see yourself for vlogging. It shoots great quality pictures. Oh, and it's another thing I mentioned. It's really good in low light. I'll put some clips of things that I've taken with this. There's one I can remember off the top of my head. We were in downtown Ottawa around Christmas, and I wanted to show the lights. And we walked around, and you got to imagine, it was pitch dark on the street other than Christmas lights from Parliament Hill. But when we filmed it, it actually looked like it was like dusk. It looked light out because this camera just brings up the darkness. It's so good in low light, and it still makes a really good picture. So great all-around camera. And again, that's the Canon G7X Mark II. Now this has been out for, God, at least a year, if not longer. So they're probably going to come out with a Canon G7 or G8X soon. But if you can get your hands on a G7X cheap, these aren't cheap when they started. I mean, I paid like in Canada like $860 or something for that. So that's why I said, if you only could afford one camera, this camera will do it. But if they come out with a G8X, it'll probably have 4K by that point. Then this camera will drop in price significantly. And I'll put all the links, the Amazon links to these various cameras I'm talking about in the description. So if you're curious about the latest price, go there. And yeah, perfect all-around camera. Let's just give it kudos for that. Now, when I first started the channel, this was the camera I had. This is my GH4. It's from Panasonic. And the one thing Panasonic cameras are known for is they make amazing video quality. It shoots 4K. It never overheats. It has limitless record time, unlike some other cameras that overheat or they have a limit to how long you can record for. This camera doesn't. So it was an awesome camera, and it's the one I started my channel with. The only reason I updated to the camera I'm recording on right now, which is the Panasonic GH5, is it didn't have in-body image stabilization. And as I mentioned with my iPhone and with the vlog camera, both of those have image stabilization. And that is something you definitely want, because if you're going to run and gun and you're walking and talking and moving, that's going to show up on the screen a lot, like a lot more than you assume it's going to if you don't have some sort of stabilization. Now in this one, it doesn't have it in the in-body, but if you buy a lens like this, which is power image stabilized, that means the lens is doing some stabilizing for the camera. But in a perfect world, you have the GH5, which is in-body image stabilized, and when you put a Panasonic lens that's got image stabilization, they work together, so you got dual image stabilization, which is super cool. It's almost like you don't need a gimbal. With this camera, I've got a Crane, a Zhiyun Crane M gimbal that works great with this. It's this camera's just small enough to fit, barely fits on that gimbal, because other than that, any bigger, it's right up against the arm and it won't work. My GH5 won't work. It's actually slightly bigger than the GH4. So this camera I've used on a stabilized gimbal and it works amazing. So not being image stabilized in body is not a deal breaker if you're planning to buy a gimbal. And the last camera, I'll just put a picture of it here because I'm filming with it, is the Panasonic GH5. And it is by far, it's a step up even from this, of course. When I first bought the GH5, I did a full breakdown comparison between the GH4 and the GH5 on my Cruising Off Duty channel. It was episode 59. So most of you may be joining this channel and never gone to Cruising Off Duty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload that episode onto this channel right after this episode. So if you're interested in the GH4 versus GH5 comparison, go and watch that episode after this one. Image stabilization, also because it shoots higher frame rates, it's just better in low light. It's supposedly got better autofocus. The claims to fame for Panasonic, and both cameras had this, was amazing battery life. The batteries that come in these cameras last and last and last and last. So a lot of other cameras, a lot of people love the Sony cameras, but they were always notorious for having really short battery life. So I know they're good in low light, especially like, what is it, the Sony S3 or 2 or whatever. Anyways, whichever one of those Sony beasts that goes amazing low light capabilities. Panasonic is not a low light camera. It'll do it, it'll do an okay job at it, but if you're gonna shoot in candlelight inside a house with no lighting, this is not the camera for you. Obviously my vlog camera would probably do a better job because it seems to be really good in low light. But the Panasonic cameras weren't amazing in low light, but they weren't bad. Like if it wasn't for the Sonys that are out there that seem to blow the doors off everybody else, you wouldn't probably even know Panasonic is falling behind Sony in that way. It beats Sony in battery life. It also, a lot of people say it beats Sony in video quality, although that's a preferential, you know, each person's view would be different. And the fact that it can record non-stop without overheating, even in 4K, was a good thing. So the GH5 has all of that and the image stabilization, so that is the camera I'm using all the time now, and it's the one I've got on this tripod. I love it, and there's not much I can complain about it. I hate giving anything a 5-star because nothing in this world is perfect. The downside that I'm just going to knock half a star off is that its focus is a little off. I do most of my footage like I'm doing right now with a manual focus, and my next episode is going to be about lenses, and I use a thing called a speed booster that brings in more light, and it also takes the crop factor away from the micro Four Thirds sensor, so you get a little bit more footage in. So that helps a lot. So I shoot mostly manual, so I'm not too concerned with the Panasonic Lumix brands not being super quick on their autofocus. Some of the ones, like some of the Canons, are much faster, that when you go from something really close to something really far, the autofocus zips to the next distance really quick, as opposed to the Panasonic, you go from something really close to something really far, and it kind of hunts for the right focus. It kind of goes towards it and then isn't sure if it's gone too far, and then it finally gets there. So yeah. If you're running and gunning and you expect it to autofocus from really close to really far, like if you're doing sports videography and you're focusing on soccer players or something and somewhere near the sidelines, and then you're shooting at somebody over on the other side, the autofocus might hunt and peck a bit, and that's where I'm going to take away half a star. I don't personally find it a problem. It does a good enough job when I need it to autofocus, but I know some people, that's their gripe on the Panasonic brands, is the autofocus is a bit, you know, what can you say? So 4.5 for the GH5. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions about the cameras I use, like I say, I'll put some footage of the different cameras in between my talk here, so hopefully you've seen some of that already. But if you have any questions about the cameras I use, leave it in the comments below. I respond to every single one, and that is that. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. If so, give it a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, and there's a bell beside it. If you click that, you'll get notified when a new episode's up. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. This is a new channel for me. Send me some comments below for anything from what cameras you're interested in and what you want to know more about. I'm going to go next into lenses, then I'm going to go into gimbals, then I'm going to go into my computer setup for editing, and then I'm going to go into normal everyday technology that's not video related. So hopefully you're looking forward to that. Like I say, subscribe, and there's much more to come. Until next time, this is Crank signing off, hoping you're having an awesome, awesome day. But like I said, love-hate relationship with these. I mean, mine leaked, so I'm a little bit leery to give it 4 stars out of 5. I think maybe I'd give it 3.5 or 3 if I knew it was gonna break all day. If another one breaks, I'm gonna give this thing a 2.